On the eve of my wedding, as soon as I entered the room, I saw my fiancé and his first love doing something immoral on our wedding bed. Lucas looked at me and didn't take it seriously, so what if you saw it? Maybe you'll have to get along with her peacefully after we get married. I immediately cancelled the wedding, however, unexpectedly, Lucas got married to his first love right away. At their wedding, I showed up holding Ethan's hand. I raised my hand to greet them, long time no see. Hurry up and call me aunt. On the eve of the wedding, I felt that something was still missing in the wedding room, so I turned back to check it again. I entered my fingerprint to unlock the door, opened the lock and entered the room, and then I heard some chaotic noises coming from inside. Just when I was wondering why there was another woman here, a familiar voice came. When I heard this voice, I stood still as if I had been hit by a body-freezing spell. I opened the door with my trembling hands and saw the two people intertwined. As soon as the woman saw me, she shouted loudly and desperately pulled the sheets to cover herself. However, Lucas looked at me angrily. You're supposed to be a lady from a noble family. Don't you know how to knock on the door? I opened my mouth slightly and pointed at the people on the bed with my trembling fingers, saying, "What are you two doing on my wedding bed?" Seeing that my bed, which was decorated with flowers, had become in a mess, I was burning with anger at that moment. What else can a man and a woman do on a bed? Chatting purely under the quilt? Seeing Lucas being so frank and that nonchalant look, I was so angry that I could hardly breathe. How disgusting are you two? We're getting married tomorrow, Lucas. How could you do this? So what if you saw it? Maybe you'll have to get along with each other peacefully. Didn't you always want to be with me? I'll satisfy you, but Olivia has to be with you too. I looked at the people on the bed and didn't refute. It seemed that he really intended to do so. What's that expression on your face? Not happy? Lucas raised his eyebrows, looking displeased. If it weren't for your father insisting that I marry you, I might have already married Olivia long ago. And you're determined to marry me too, so I can only wrong Olivia. Seeing him so calm when saying these words, as if he had already made up his mind, I quickly walked towards him, and with my eyes red, I slapped him hard on the face. Pa! What a beautiful dream! You still want to take a concubine? Lucas covered his face and looked at me in disbelief. After realizing what had happened, he became furious. Emily, are you tired of living? How dare you hit me? Seeing that Lucas was hurt, Olivia also stood up as if protecting her own child. What are you doing? How can you hit people? Seeing this, I also went up and slapped Olivia twice on the face. I used a lot of strength, and her face swelled up with just one slap. Lucas still wanted to stop me, but by then I had already withdrawn my hand. I pointed at the two of them and cursed loudly, "I'm hitting you two adulterers." After saying this, I walked away with my head held high. At this time, Lucas shouted at my back, "If you have the guts, don't regret it. When you want to come back later, there will be no place for you by my side." Hearing these words, I spat at the two of them and then went downstairs. Sitting in the car, I didn't say a word and just went home with my eyes red all the way. As soon as I entered the door, my mother came up. Seeing my red eyes, she had been smiling happily just a moment ago. Seeing that I was crying, she immediately frowned and came forward to ask, "What's wrong with you? Why are you crying after going back there?" "Mom, Lucas was doing that kind of thing with another woman on my wedding bed." Hearing this, my mother immediately cursed and went to the study to drag my father out. Sitting in the living room and listening to me tell the whole story of this matter, my father slapped the table hard. "How dare he? How dare he treat my daughter like this? I'll go to his house to argue with them right away." Hearing this, I immediately stretched out my hand to stop him. I ran to the storeroom, picked up the hammer in the corner, and wiped my tears hard, saying, "I'll go with you." My father looked at the hammer in my hand and swallowed hard. He asked with some worry, "Are you really going to take this?" I nodded vigorously and looked at the rusty weapon, saying, "It's rusty. It's easy to get tetanus. Let's go." After saying this, I took my father to Lucas's house. The two of us grew up together since childhood, and we lived in the same villa area. Later, when we entered their house, we found that Lucas hadn't come back yet. We first explained what Lucas had done to me. After Lucas's parents learned about it, they were also furious and shouted that they would beat Lucas to death. In fact, everyone knew in their hearts that his parents would never beat him. They were just saying that for us to hear. Finally, this time, for my sake, My father also showed his dissatisfaction to Lucas's parents and returned all the betrothal gifts they had sent. After all, the two families had been friends for many years. I didn't want the two families to part on bad terms because of the stupid thing Lucas had done. Otherwise, there would be fewer opportunities to take revenge on Lucas. After canceling the wedding, in order to relax, I was invited by my friends to go singing. Unexpectedly, I ran into Lucas and them. Lucas was standing beside the toilet with a cigarette in his mouth. All his friends were around him. The curling white smoke made his face look somewhat indistinct. I remembered that he didn't smoke before. Just at this moment, I saw Olivia coming out of the bathroom. As soon as she came out, she saw me. She didn't even feel embarrassed and even came up to greet me. "You're here to sing too?" I wasn't going to answer her. At this time, Lucas let out a sneer. I thought she would be the same as before. At most, she would just disappear for a day or two and then come back. "Did you come here because you knew where I was in advance?" "I think so. After all, our mission can do anything just to stay by Lucas's side." One of the people around Lucas chimed in. I frowned and looked at the people in front of me. In the past, when Lucas went out to fool around, he liked to send me a message the most. Every time he would say that as long as I came, he would go back with me obediently. I don't know where the sense of responsibility came from at that time. Since we grew up together, I had the idea of bringing him back to the right path. I went every time, and that's how the rumor that the eldest daughter of the Sioux family would come whenever summoned came about. "I think she still can't bear to part with you. I guess she's here this time to make up and beg you to go back and get married." My friend rolled her eyes to the sky when she heard these words. "We don't care about a scumbag like you." At this time, the friends standing aside were obviously stunned when they heard this. It was also because Lucas's parents had repeatedly asked us not to spread this matter, so it was normal that Lucas's friends didn't know about it. "All right, talking to these brainless people will lower our class. Let's go." Seeing that I didn't go to him to please him like a dog as usual, Lucas immediately came up and grabbed my hand, saying, "Are you just leaving like this?" Feeling his disgusting body temperature, I reflexively shook off his hand. I took out a wet tissue and wiped vigorously the place that Lucas had touched. Disgust radiated from my whole body. Lucas had never seen me like this before. He looked at me with complicated emotions. "You, don't touch me. You're so dirty." At this time, the people who had been laughing aside immediately shut their mouths when they heard my tone. After I threw the wiped tissue into the trash can, I left. However, Lucas looked at the tissue in the trash can and remained silent for a long time. Finally, he only reacted when Olivia called him. On the way back, my friend Ava kept comforting me. "All right, don't keep thinking about this scumbag. It'll spoil our mood." As she said that, Ava slowly moved closer to me and whispered in my ear, "If he's looking for others, can't we do the same? Just now when you went to the toilet, I secretly ordered a few young masters. They're so handsome. We'll have a great time later." Hearing this, I suddenly widened my eyes. Although I wasn't new to this place, because of my strict family education, I had never ordered these services before. I couldn't help feeling a bit flustered, but there was also an indescribable sense of excitement in my heart about breaking the rules. It was thrilling. "This isn't very proper, is it? We're just drinking and singing together. What are you thinking?" Hearing Ava's words, I immediately understood that she had misunderstood me just now, and my face turned red in an instant. Just at this moment, as we just walked to the door, we saw a man standing there. Seeing us coming, he was slightly stunned at first. Ava's eyes were fixed on this man. She grabbed his hand and walked towards the private room, saying, "Since you're here, come in first." As she said that, she smiled and pushed the man inside. After thinking about it, I thought it was just indulging myself once, and there was nothing wrong with it. After waiting for a while, the remaining young masters also came in. Because of them, the atmosphere became lively. However, no matter where I stood in this private room, I could feel that there was a gaze fixed on me. Finally, under the promotion of those young masters, we drank a lot of wine until I passed out on the sofa. In a daze, I felt that the people around me stood up and went to Ava's side, saying, "Hey, I've already informed your family to come and pick you up. You wait here for a while. I'll take her back first." Ava struggled to raise her head and waved her hand, then went back to sleep. And I was carried out of the private room by this man. As soon as we went out, we ran into Lucas and them. Hearing their voices, I struggled to get down from the man's arms. I went up to Lucas and slapped him hard. Everyone around was shocked and looked at me. They couldn't believe that a person who used to endure everything would hit someone. Bastard. I should have brought that rusty hammer with me. At least I could have killed you with one blow. As soon as these words came out, there was a soft laugh from behind. I looked at the man with dissatisfaction. What are you laughing at? The man put his arm around my shoulder and looked at me dotingly. Next time I'll bring it for you. After saying that, the man was about to take me away, but Lucas suddenly rushed up. Where are you taking her? I looked at him with a flirtatious look in my eyes and a hint of mockery at the corner of my mouth. Taking her on a date. This man suits my taste very well. After saying this, I pulled the man and walked outside. Lucas still wanted to chase after us, but was stopped by Olivia. Finally, he could only watch helplessly as I was taken away. After walking outside, the effect of the alcohol kicked in. My mind began to get muddled. Looking at the man in a suit sitting beside me, I grabbed his tie and frowned. Where are you taking me, old lady? After saying this, I started acting crazy again. Haha, I'm not afraid no matter where you take me. I'm invincible. The Civil Affairs Bureau. Hearing these 3 words, my mind cleared up a bit. No, forget it. Besides, we need to make an appointment. Emma, make an appointment for tomorrow's marriage registration. Emma was driving in front. Looking at my stunned expression in the rearview mirror, she showed a fox-like smile. Got it, boss. Because I was drunk, I quickly forgot about going to the Civil Affairs Bureau just now. Singing loudly in the car, seeing that I was in high spirits, the secretary also cooperated and sang along with me. It was extremely noisy inside the Rolls-Royce. Some car owners saw the car and originally wanted to say hello, but as soon as they rolled down the car window and heard the singing, they were obviously stunned for a moment. Finally, they still greeted us politely and then drove away. In the end, he sent me to the door of my house and didn't rush me to get out of the car. Instead, he let the secretary get out of the car first, then he lifted my chin and said, "Don't you really remember who I am?" I involuntarily raised my hand and traced his outline with my fingertips. I had some impression in my mind, but who was he? He looked quite like a kid in my memory. Are you that little girl? Ethan, right? But Ethan is a girl. She's so cute. Hearing my words, Ethan slowly lowered his head and burst out laughing. Let me take you back. After saying that, I was helped out of the car. When I arrived at the door of my house, I stared at the doorbell of my house for a long time without pressing it, until finally, I just passed out right in front of my house. When I woke up again, as soon as I opened my eyes, I saw Ethan standing beside my bed, holding my clothes in his hand. I stared at him blankly. Then I lifted the quilt and saw that I was still fully dressed and didn't feel uncomfortable anywhere on my body. Who are you? This is my room. Ethan sat beside me and handed me the clothes in his hand, saying, I'm Ethan, that girl. Have you forgotten? Looking at the tall, strong man with broad shoulders and a narrow waist in front of me, he didn't seem like a girl at all. Just at this moment, I suddenly shouted loudly, threw off the quilt and ran outside. I even forgot to put on my shoes. When I came to the living room, I saw my mother was watching a soap opera. I stood in front of her and pointed to my room, saying, that man stayed overnight in our house? My mother looked at Ethan who was coming downstairs and said, yes. You let him stay even though he didn't know you? Didn't you bring him back yesterday? You were shouting, I want to marry him, I want to marry him. Didn't you say that? As she said that, my mother pointed to the household register on the table and said, it's all been prepared for you. Ethan walked up behind me and casually tugged at the clothes behind me. I felt that the corner of my clothes was pulled out of my pants. In an instant, I felt my face burning. Could it be that when I went downstairs, the clothes had been stuck in my pants all the time? Didn't he see everything? At this time, my face was as red as a boiled shrimp. I immediately stretched out my hand to cover my buttocks and turned to look at Ethan. I saw that he was looking at me with a smile. A sense of shame welled up in me. Just at this moment, my father also came out, holding a teacup in his hand. When he saw the two of us, he said, what are you still waiting for here? The Civil Affairs Bureau is already open. There may be a lot of people going there today since it's May 20th. You two should hurry up and go. Even my father agreed? It was so unbelievable. What on earth did this man do to make my parents so satisfied? I just picked out a set of clothes for you just now. It's suitable for taking wedding photos today. In this way, in confusion, I was taken to my room by my mother and changed my clothes. Then I was pushed into the car and rushed straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. My parents standing at the door watched the car driving away and said, "Is this really okay? He's Lucas's uncle." Lucas's family's business all depends on Ethan's family. And Lucas doesn't seem to be good material for doing business. If our daughter marries into his family, she'll only be picked on by many relatives of Ethan's family. If that's the case, it's better to marry Ethan, the head of Ethan's family. We know Ethan very well. At least he won't let our daughter be wronged. Hearing this, my father just nodded. At this time, my father suddenly seemed to think of something and suddenly looked at my mother. Have you ever thought that Ethan is Amelia's younger brother? If our daughter marries him, they'll become sisters. Amelia is still your best friend. Isn't that a generation gap? My mother spat out the tea she had just drunk in an instant. Damn it. Call her back quickly. It's too late. When we arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau, I filled out all the forms according to the instructions of the staff. After coming out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I had a feeling of unreality. Looking at the red marriage certificate in my hand, I raised my head and looked at the person in front of me and said, "Who on earth are you?" "Ethan, Lucas's uncle." At this time, I was really stunned. Lucas's uncle? Are you kidding me? How old are you? I asked tentatively. 26. I was born when my parents were old. Hearing this age, I breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the age difference wasn't too big. Don't you really remember who I am? I shook my head and said, I know, but I didn't know you were Lucas's uncle. Knowing that I still remembered him, Ethan's eyes suddenly lit up and then immediately became calm. I'll prepare for the wedding as soon as possible. I stared at the wedding photo in my hand in a daze and then said, okay. Not long after getting married, I moved into Ethan's house and started living together. However, what I didn't expect was that even when I wanted to move out, my parents didn't stop me. Instead, they even sent me out with smiles on their faces. Just when Ethan and I were carefully preparing for the wedding, my mother's best friend sent us wedding invitations. She even called me and said, I didn't originally want to send them. After all, what happened between you and Lucas? Whether you come or not is up to you. Hearing this phone call, I wasn't angry. Instead, I even said with a smile, of course I'll come, but in a different identity. Ethan's mother was also confused by what I said and mumbled an agreement and then hung up the phone. Soon, it was the day of Lucas's wedding. Ethan and I both attended in formal attire. People who came recognized Ethan at a glance. Actually, not many people knew that Ethan and I got married. But whenever someone came up to say hello, they would ask, I guess you're Mrs. Ethan, right? It seemed that they already knew about it. Until I asked Ethan, he just smiled and said, I only informed some people. I didn't expect it to spread. I could only smile helplessly. At this time, Ethan said, I'm going to the washroom. Wait for me here. I nodded and then found a seat and sat there quietly. Just when I was about to take a piece of cake to eat, suddenly a hand snatched away the very cake that I was about to eat. I knew my mother gave you an invitation. I didn't expect you'd really come. You said you'd attend my wedding in another identity. What identity? Ex-girlfriend? Just then, all of Lucas's good-for-nothing friends came over together. They also looked surprised when they saw me. Oh, you're here. This outfit looks really nice. Since Brother Gene doesn't want you anymore, I do. Why don't you follow me instead? This man even made some flirtatious moves towards me. Just when I was about to curse at him, Lucas was the first to take action. He grabbed the man by the collar and looked at the man in front of him angrily, saying, even if it's something I don't want, you guys are not allowed to touch it. After saying that, he pushed the man hard, and the man took several steps back. I sneered and said, we've already broken up. Why are you still so possessive? What if I marry someone else? What would you do? Beat him to death? I've said it before. Even if I don't want it, others can't have it either. As he said that, Lucas looked at me, looked me up and down. This time, the clothes I wore were not as proper as before. Instead, it was a shoulder-exposing dress that showed some of my cleavage. Seeing that Lucas was still staring at that part of me, without thinking, I slapped him across the face, looking at him with contempt. I said, "What are you looking at? I didn't pay much attention to you before. I didn't expect you to have such a good figure." As he said that, Lucas raised his head to look at me, with a smile on his lips and an aggressive look in his eyes. "Actually, as long as you say it today that you want to come back to me, I can immediately stop this wedding and marry you instead. What do you think?" In Lucas's mouth, this wedding seemed like just a game, and the players could be changed at any time. Just like not long ago, I was supposed to be the bride. "Well, are you coming or not?" Just when I was about to slap him again, a figure firmly blocked me behind him, blocking Lucas's intention to continue approaching me. "Little nephew, what do you want to do to your aunt?" After Ethan said this, his eyes narrowed slightly, carrying a hint of danger. Lucas thought he had heard wrong and asked, "What did you say? What is she to me?" "I'm your aunt. Didn't I say that I would attend your wedding in another identity? Hurry up and call me aunt and let me hear it." Lucas's eyes darted back and forth between me and Ethan. When he saw the engagement rings that we had custom made not long ago, he still couldn't believe it. "In just a few days, you got together with my uncle. Who's as bad as you? On the eve of our almost getting married, you were with your ex-girlfriend and even slept with her." At this time, the friends standing beside us immediately understood what I meant by what I said last time when they heard me say this. The "rotten cucumber" turned out to refer to Lucas's cheating. Lucas took a few steps back and then left the wedding venue. Just then, the master of ceremonies also came onto the stage. He was just about to call the groom, but unexpectedly, he just watched helplessly as Lucas fled the wedding venue, and Olivia was standing behind that door. Looking at the wedding dress on her, I felt it was somewhat familiar. "Lucas, where are you going?" Lucas didn't even reply to her. He rushed out in one go. Olivia originally wanted to chase after him, but the dress she was wearing was too heavy. She hadn't chased after him for a few steps before she tripped and fell to the ground. Finally, she dragged herself back in a sorry state, and her makeup was already smeared from crying. Looking at all the guests in the seats, who were all looking at her one after another, she just felt that in this wedding, she was the biggest fool. She just stood there, looked around the crowd, and after realizing that I was also at the wedding, she finally understood what was going on. She threw the bridal bouquet on the ground hard and then walked towards me. "It's you. It must be you. Why did you come?" I was clearly about to marry him. "Why did you come?" As she said that, Olivia even wanted to grab my neck. I blocked her attack with a slap. "Why? I'm just attending the wedding as his elder. As for why he suddenly changed his mind and didn't want to marry, how would I know?" Olivia covered her face. When she looked at me, she seemed to want to tear me apart. "Elder? What elder? You must have said something to him, that's why he's like this." Olivia was still being stubborn. I looked her up and down. I smiled and said, "Do you really think he likes you? If he liked you, that wedding dress couldn't be the one I wore when I tried on wedding dresses. If he liked you, why was he fooling around with you the day before he was supposed to marry me? Why didn't he stay chaste for you from the very beginning? Nothing he did showed that he liked you. It's you who's daydreaming that marrying him would enable you to climb up the social ladder by relying on him." Hearing my words, Olivia sneered and mocked. "Does he like you then?" "Of course he doesn't like me either. We grew up together. Actually, I've always been the one unrequitedly loving him." Later, I gradually realized that he only had his eye on my family's company, which could help him gain a foothold in Ethan's family. We didn't make it clear because his parents and mine are friends. We saw through it but didn't expose it. After all, it was just his own idea. Lucas's father sighed deeply after hearing my words and stopped looking at me. As Lucas's father, how could he not know what his son was really like? His goal was almost achieved. Why did he suddenly give up? Because he wanted to test whether I would really be obedient to him. But this time, he bet wrong. Even he has been making mistakes all along. He shouldn't have tested my bottom line again and again. In fact, I hadn't understood why Lucas treated me like this before. It was only under Olivia's questioning that I finally figured everything out. After saying that, I couldn't help but laugh. "That was towards you. I believe he wouldn't treat me like that." After saying this, Olivia didn't say anything else and just rushed out directly, as if she had made up her mind about something. This wedding thus ended on a sour note. Almost all the people who came were bigwigs in the business world. With the groom leaving so suddenly, they were naturally unhappy and left the wedding venue with gloomy faces one after another. And we also went back to the place where we lived. I didn't know what Ethan was doing these days. Anyway, he was basically not at home. I like handicrafts, and I have my own shop outside, which specializes in making all kinds of small handicrafts. I just do it for fun. When I'm free, I'm basically staying in my own shop. On this day, I had an apron tied around my waist and my hair clipped up with a claw clip. I was pinching the clay in my hands and concentrating on fulfilling the orders. Just when I was fully absorbed in it, the door was opened and the doorbell rang at the same time. When I looked up, I realized that the person was Lucas, whom I hadn't seen for a long time. He stood cautiously at the door and looked over at me from time to time. Seeing his extremely furtive look, those who were originally interested were scared and didn't dare to come in. I then said impatiently, "If you have something to say, just say it. If not, get out." Seeing that I gave the order to leave, Lucas then came in. "I'm here to apologize to you." Hearing his words, I didn't stop what I was doing with my hands. He continued, "I thought about it for a long time after I went back. We grew up together since childhood. There's still affection between us. If you're still going to say such nonsense, get out of here right away. I want to court you again. Okay? Let me make it up to you. I'm begging you." Hearing his words, I put down the things in my hands and looked up at him. "What do you think are your advantages in courting me now? Before, it was feelings. What about now? I don't have feelings for you anymore." "How could that be? We've been together for so long. It's impossible that there's no feeling." "I don't believe it." Lucas was very excited at this time and even rushed up, trying to get close to me. Seeing that I was scared, he then stopped in his tracks. "I've realized the feelings in my heart. I still like you. I'll like you no matter what you're like." Seeing that no matter what I said, he still insisted on having feelings for me, I had no choice but to take out the wedding photo of me and Ethan. "Actually, to be honest with you, I've already married your uncle. Now I'm your aunt. You'd better stay away from me." Looking at the wedding photo of me and Ethan on my phone, Lucas blushed with anger. "I thought you would always like me. I didn't expect that you're the biggest traitor in our relationship." This sentence really hurt me. I put away my phone and suddenly stood up, saying, "How dare you say this to me? Do you want me to repeat what you did? You should be ashamed, and I'm even ashamed for you. No one will always like someone. Even if there is, any amount of love will be worn away bit by someone like you. Get out of here quickly. I don't want to see you." Seeing that he had said the wrong thing, Lucas immediately softened his tone and said, "I didn't mean to say that. I wanted to talk to you nicely. I don't know why it always turns out like this." Seeing that he couldn't control his emotions and even became a bit anxious, suddenly, he pushed the door open and ran towards his luxury car parked not far away. He took out a big bunch of flowers from the car and ran towards me. "These are for you. Please, let's make up." Just when I was about to persuade him to leave, someone suddenly pushed the door open. Seeing Lucas kneeling on one knee, I looked at the person in front of me and said, "It's useless no matter what I say. You talk to him. Kid, she's your aunt now. What are you doing?" Hearing his uncle's voice, Lucas immediately raised his head and said, "Why are you here? If I had known you would try to steal her from me, I shouldn't have let you take her away that day." Ethan sneered and said, "But you gave your aunt to me just to please another woman." Ethan emphasized again that I was his aunt. Seeing that he couldn't argue with Ethan, Lucas turned to look at me. Seeing that I ignored him, he finally had to turn around and leave. Just 1 second before he was about to go out the door, Ethan suddenly called him back and said, "By the way, we'll hold a wedding soon. You have to come." Hearing this, Lucas immediately threw all the flowers in his hands into the trash can. Then he left angrily. Seeing that he finally left, I felt much quieter and continued with what I was doing. Ethan just sat quietly beside me, watching the things I was making. Probably because of Ethan's presence, quite a few girls soon came into the shop. Seeing that I was busy, he went up to greet the customers. The girls quickly surrounded him. I sat behind and watched him being blocked by a group of young girls and looking too embarrassed to refuse. It was really interesting. Finally, after seeing the ring on Ethan's hand, those girls realized what was going on. They all bought some things and then left. Your daily income here is only a little over 500 after such a long day. It's too little. What I earn is not just this. I also have some online orders. This shop belongs to me, so apart from paying the water and electricity bills, there's basically not much expense. What I earn is enough for me to buy snacks. Besides, I just opened this shop for fun. Ethan nodded seriously. Suddenly, he turned his head to look at me. Is it true that you said you won't always like one person? You won't always like me either, right? Hearing these words, my hands paused for a moment. Did you hear that? You two were arguing quite loudly. I heard it outside. Ethan snatched the tool in my hands. Answer my question first. Yes or no? No. Hearing my answer, Ethan's face showed surprise at first, and then slowly returned to calm. So, I can't absolutely guarantee that I can do it myself. Just like Lucas, if you also slowly wear down my love for you like he did, I won't always love you. But I've gradually fallen in love with you now. You won't do that, right? Hearing what I said, Ethan immediately put his arm around my waist, buried his head in the hollow of my neck, took a deep breath and said, No, never. Don't be so absolute in what you say. Just no. I looked at the person in front of me, just smiled and didn't nod in agreement. I didn't dare to promise him. I fell in love with you the first time I saw you when I was a child. At that time, my family thought I was born when they were old and were afraid that I wouldn't be easy to raise, so they raised me as a girl. You were so domineering back then, like a big sister, always liking to lead me into trouble. Later, I went abroad. I've come back a few times since I grew up. But at that time, your eyes were always fixed on Lucas. And I changed from a girl to a boy, and you didn't remember me. But you've always been in my heart. I've loved you for more than 20 years. Loving you for so long, it won't be difficult to love you for a lifetime. Although every word touched me deeply, I just smiled. I didn't give any response because I was afraid that one day when I fell head over heels in love with him, he would suddenly abandon me. That feeling would be really hard to bear. Finally, he stayed in my shop until evening, and then we closed the shop and went home together. After a few days, he took me to the bridal shop. I thought he had already forgotten about the wedding since he had been so busy these days. Unexpectedly, he had been so busy these days just because he was occupied with the wedding arrangements. He ordered 3 sets of dresses for me in total and let me choose. Each one was extremely beautiful. Later, I also heard from the salesperson that he even designed these dresses for me by himself. It made me feel incredible that he was a bit too perfect. I actually hoped that he had a little flaw. On the day of sending out the invitations, we found that a lot of people were coming. In the end, we had no choice but to change the venue to the manor outside the city. Otherwise, it really couldn't accommodate so many people. On the wedding day, almost everyone showed up. Lucas also came. This time, he wore the suit that he was supposed to wear when he married me and came to the venue. When he looked at me, his face was full of longing. Only then did I realize that he still hadn't let go. When it was time to offer toasts, a woman suddenly rushed in from outside the door. Her disheveled hair covered most of her face. When she accidentally showed her face, I realized that this person was actually Olivia. Look quickly. Look, how cute our baby is, isn't it? Baby? I looked at the tattered pillow in Olivia's arms, not understanding what was going on. When I raised my head, I met Lucas's cold expression. He stretched out his hand and said, Hurry up and drive this crazy woman out. Lucas, Lucas. Look, this is our baby. You can't abandon our mother and child like this. After the woman was dragged away, he came to me, pursed his lips slightly and said, She was pregnant with your child. Did you make her abort the baby? If that baby had been born, between us, since the day you cheated, there's been nothing between us. After saying this, I took a deep breath and said, The baby is innocent. After saying that, I turned around and left. In the days that followed, when I talked to him, it was like talking to an elder. When we met, we just exchanged basic greetings. The two of us were like strangers. I want to ask the question from when we were young. Can you still love me all the time now? I looked at the person in front of me. His hair had already turned gray, but the heroic spirit on his face had never disappeared. Always loved, even more than anything else. I originally thought that no one could make love last forever. Even if someone could do it, that person must be really remarkable, and Ethan did it. He cherished and took care of me with all his heart for a whole lifetime.